Yay!
When they disobeyed, they lost.
Boo!
They won some.
Yay!
They lost some.
Boo!
Sometimes they even...
We get the picture!
Okay. Where was I? Yes, thanks, I got it. And in this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan, the promised land. Scene 5, entering the promised land.
Or, where's Judge Judy when you need her?
Before his death, Joshua gave the Israelites some instructions.
I'm going to die soon.
Die? I didn't even know he was sick.
I'm not sick, I'm old.
Oh, you look pretty good. I mean,
Oh, great hair.
Okay, you guys finished now, or can I finish before I keel over here? Thank you. Now, don't forget everything that God has done for us after I'm gone. Continue to obey him. Now, he commands us of one thing still. Now that we possess most of the land of Canaan, we must continue to defeat the rest of the peoples here.
Aw, do we have to?
Yes, you schmutzers, you do.
But why?
Because God knows what a bunch of shamils you are. Now, listen up. God wants this land totally dedicated to him. And the people who live on the outskirts of this land worship other gods. So, he wants us to push them out so that we can worship him, and you guys won't be tempted to follow after false gods.
We won't.
No, we promise.
Like I haven't heard that before.
And so Joshua died, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
The Israelites ignored God's command to clear out all their people living in Canaan. Scene 6, the judges. The time of the judge was a tricky one for the Israelites. They refused to obey God and clear out all other people living in Canaan. And because of this sin, more sin followed. Soon they were marrying people they shouldn't have been marrying and following false gods. They pretty much abandoned God, and God allowed them to be captured and taken prisoner by their enemies.
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
Hey, isn't this kind of our own fault?
You mean if we had cleared all the people like God has told us to in the beginning, we wouldn't be here?
Yeah.
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
And so God sent them a leader, a judge, to lead them to victory against the enemies who had captured them.
Woo!
And this is how it went for 325 years. The Israelites would follow and obey God, and he would bless them and give them victory over their enemies.
Charge!
But then they'd get kind of comfy, forget about God, and God would allow them to be beaten by their enemies.
Run away!
Run away!
They'd cry out to God for help.
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
And God would send them a new judge to free them.
Woo!
On and on, it went like this.
Charge! God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies! Woo! Charge! Run away! God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies! Woo! Charge! Run away!
Okay, enough. It's madness. Needless to say, they were caught in a terrible cycle of sin. During this time, a few people kept following God no matter what. People like Boaz,
Howdy.
who was a simple rancher during that time, and Gideon,
Little lady.
who was one of the judges. God sent to lead the Israelites to victory. But as I said, the cycle of sin and disobedience continued for 325 years. You may wonder, where does it end?
Where does it end? Where does it end?
It ends with scene 7, the kings.
Or out of the frying pan and into the fire.
The last judge during this time was a guy named Samuel. But when he retired, the Israelites started whining again.
We don't want a judge anymore.
No, we want a king.
The Philistines have a king.
The Amalekites have a king.
We want a king.
Want
Want him now.
Samuel, he was furious.
I am furious. Don't you people know what a king would be like? He would take your sons and daughters and make them serve him, cooking his meals, feeding his horses, fighting in his army. He would take the best of your lands and fields and the food that grows there for himself. You would be his slaves, practically.
Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Read our lips.
We want a king and we want him now!
So God gave them a king.
Woo!
He knew that this would not solve everything, but he saw that they would have to learn this the hard way. During this time, there were many kings. First, King Saul. King Saul was a pretty good king for a while, but then he slipped into sin and disobedience, and so God replaced him with David.
What?
You heard me.
Aw, what?
Yeah.
David
Bye-bye.
was a very good king, and during his rule, the Israelites finally seemed to be on track, following God and being obedient. I mean, don't get me wrong. David did have his share of mess-ups and everything, like that Bathsheba incident.
Really? Do you have to bring that up? I mean, every time. Could it have one time where you just...
But overall, David had a great role and was known for being a man after God's own heart. David set up the city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and God promised David that his son would be the one to build the temple.
Yes!
And that David's family would rule forever.
That's right. Yes.
So David died.
Well, but I just got here.
David dies.
Bye.
Whatever.
And so Solomon became king. Solomon was a great king and did build the temple.
That's right. I'm bad Solomon. How say hey? Say oh.
Yeah. But in the end, he blew it all.
Oh.
Yeah, you did. By disobeying God and worshiping other false gods, Solomon...
Solomon, how say hey? Say oh.
Hi. Still, no. So, Solomon set off a chain reaction that led to Israel's ruin.
Really? I did all that?
Yeah, kind of did. After Solomon's death, a kind of civil war broke out between the north and the south of Israel. Israel was split as a result of Solomon's sin, just as God had warned. Both kingdoms, the north and the south...
Northern Israel is the best. The south, you know, is second best. Go north.
Achman, you know what time it is, right?
I sure do, Ronestein.
It's time for the perfect
Cheer! Ready? Who's the Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me.
Who's the Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me. Northern Israel, we don't want to hear it, because we're the Israelites with the spirit.
So go back north and shut your mouth. The coolest Jews are from the south.
Southern Israel rocks.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
So, like I was saying, both kingdoms, the north and the south, were led by king after king after king, almost all bad kings. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until...
Wait a minute.
Yes, Solomon?
What about God's promise to my dad that my family would rule forever and ever? These bad kings weren't from my family.
It's Jesus. Jesus is the king from your family who will rule forever?
Jesus?
Yeah, I'm getting to that too, mine. You're supposed to be dead at this point anyways. Where was I?
Further and further.
Thank you. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until scene 8, the exile.
Or we'll be back.
During the time of the kings, God had sent prophets to warn the people. These were men set by God to speak for him, warning people away from sin.
Back away from the sin, citizens. Move away from the sin. There's nothing to see here. Move back toward the God of your ancestors and away from the sin. I'm a trained professional. I know what I'm doing. Back to your obedient lives, citizens. Yeah, I'm talking to you.
But no dice. Nothing worked. So God brought the ruin on Israel that he had told Solomon he would. Northern Israel was attacked by a country called Assyria. They were captured and hauled off to Assyria as slaves and servants. Southern Israel, now called Judah...
Okay, who's the coolest south country?
It's Judah. It's Judah.
Okay.
Who's the coolest
Hi.
south country?
Hi.
Judah.
In
It's
the middle
Judah.
of speaking here. You guys need to...
Southern
Stand
Israel
up.
rocks! Go Judah!
Boo!
Okay, so southern Israel, now called Judah, was attacked by a country called Babylon. They too were captured and hauled off to Babylon as slaves and servants. During this time, a lot of interesting stuff happened.
In the news today, a man named Isaiah, claiming to be a prophet of God, announced that there is a day coming soon when God will be sending a deliverer. The man said, and I quote, "Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son will be given. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." End quote. More in this story at 9.
Apparently, 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bubblegum, were thrown to a fiery furnace today and lived. More at 11.
In a spectacular story today, a man named Daniel was thrown into a den of hungry lions and survived. That and other stories at 5.
Tonight's top story, Queen Esther, Queen of Persia, wife of King Xerxes, saves all the Jews in Persia from total annihilation. This and more at midnight.
Reports confirm that over 50,000 Jews returned to Jerusalem today. And these Jews and their families were taken over by Babylon 70 years earlier, but are now the first to have returned to their homeland. A spokesman for the Israelites confirmed that they do plan to rebuild the temple, which was destroyed in the Babylonian attack 70 years earlier. The rest of Jerusalem lies in ruins. Back to you, Gina.
And so it went. The Jews had been exiled from their homeland, but even as captives in these foreign countries, God still used his people. Time passed, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
70 years after they were taken captive, the first of them began to make their way home. There was a man named Nehemiah who was still living in Persia at this time. When reports came back from Jerusalem that the city was in ruins, he was heartbroken.
King Artaxerxes, I'm heartbroken. I must be able to go to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall.
What, are you nuts?
No. With the wall destroyed, the enemies of my people will be free to attack, and Jerusalem will be taken captive again. I must go and rebuild the wall so that my God may be honored.
All right, go.
And Nehemiah leads us to scene 9, the return to Jerusalem.
Or, deja vu, I think I've been here before.
Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem with the help of King Artaxerxes and rallied the Jews to begin rebuilding the wall.
Okay, everybody, okay, we're going to build this wall. We're going to build this wall. Wait, I got the plans right here. God is really going to be honored when we build this wall. And a matter of fact, you know what? All the Jews are going to be able to come home and return safely. That's right.
And so the Jewish people worked and worked.
Oompa, loompa, doopity-doo.
If you are wise to
Around the clock, they worked. They faced much opposition. Enemies of the Jews tried to stop them, and they carried their swords in one hand and their tools in the other.
Oh, Charlie, the other hand has your hand. There you go. That's right.
But despite the opposition they faced, they rebuilt the entire wall around the city of Jerusalem in 52 days.
Woo! Yeah. All
During
right.
the rebuilding of the walls, Nehemiah became governor, and he led the people in an amazing thing.
Okay, everybody. That's right. We're going back to the promised land. We're going to go back and make the covenant with God that we were and become his people again. God has returned us to the promised land, the land that was promised to Abraham, and he brought us home. Now we will go and we will be God's people.
Woohoo! And in a way that happened. The people recommitted themselves to God and to living his ways for the first time in many years. They didn't get it perfect, but it was closer than they had been in several years.
Many years passed, 400 years to be exact, and not much is recorded during that time.
We do know that Rome, who was traveling the world conquering cities, took control of Jerusalem. They didn't enslave the Jews, but they put a Roman king over the whole city. His name was Herod.
Not much else happened during that time. The Jews went about their normal day lives, as did the rest of the world, loving God, but not being in that close relationship that God had designed from the very beginning.
Until one silent night.
The cry of a newborn baby could be heard coming from a filthy stable.
But that is the rest of the story. After all, a good writer always leaves room for a sequel.